Have you ever imagined spending months learning makeup in secret, practicing every step after everyone else had gone to bed, only to freeze the moment your front door finally opened? Most people think the hardest part of cross-dressing is choosing the right dress or applying perfect eyeliner. They're wrong. The hardest part is taking that very first step outside, knowing every stranger might look at you while you wonder if they can see through every layer of confidence you've spent months building. What happened to me that morning completely changed the way I saw myself forever. I expected embarrassment, fear, and maybe even regret. Instead, one unexpected encounter taught me something every new crossdresser needs to hear before leaving home for the first time. If you've ever dreamed about experiencing the world as your feminine self but fear keeps stopping you, stay with me until the end, because the final lesson I learned that day completely erased the biggest mistake I had been making all along. For almost a year, my feminine wardrobe had existed only inside my bedroom. Every dress was carefully hidden behind old jackets. Every pair of heels stayed inside plain shoeboxes that looked completely ordinary. My makeup lived inside a small black case that could disappear into a drawer within seconds if someone unexpectedly knocked on my door. Every evening after work, I transformed into someone who felt more genuine than the person everyone knew during the day. At first, it was only curiosity. I wanted to know how different clothes would feel. Then, I became fascinated with learning makeup techniques. I spent hours watching tutorials, pausing every few seconds to copy each brush movement. Foundation became smoother. Eyeliner became straighter. Lipstick stopped looking messy. My confidence inside my room slowly grew. The mirror became my closest friend. Instead of seeing someone pretending to be someone else, I started seeing another side of myself that had always existed but had never been allowed to breathe. Every improvement made me want to learn something new. I practiced walking in heels across the room without looking down. I balanced books on my head to improve posture. I recorded my voice to make it softer, without sounding forced. I studied how women naturally used their hands while talking, how they smiled, how they sat, how they carried themselves with quiet confidence instead of constant self-consciousness. Still, one thought refused to leave my mind. None of this mattered if I never opened the front door. Every evening I would stand beside it wearing a dress, holding my handbag, heart racing so loudly I could almost hear it. My hand would reach for the handle, pause, then slowly let go. I always found another excuse. It was too late. Too many neighbors were outside. The weather wasn't right. I needed more practice. Maybe next weekend. Maybe next month. Deep down, I knew those weren't real reasons. I was terrified. Not terrified of strangers. Terrified that I would finally discover I wasn't brave enough. One Friday evening, I looked at myself in the mirror and realized something uncomfortable. Nearly a year had passed, yet my biggest achievement was walking confidently from one side of my bedroom to the other. I had spent hundreds of hours preparing for a moment I kept postponing. That night, I made a promise. Tomorrow, no matter how scared I felt, I was leaving the house. There would be no excuses. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. My stomach felt full of nervous energy. Even breakfast tasted strange, because my mind was already imagining every possible disaster. What if someone recognized me? What if my makeup looked terrible in daylight? What if people laughed? What if everyone stared? Then another thought appeared. What if none of those things happened? I took a long shower, giving myself extra time to relax. Instead of rushing through my routine, I treated every step as a quiet reminder that I had prepared for this day. Moisturizer, primer, foundation blended carefully into my neck, soft blush, neutral eyeshadow, thin eyeliner, mascara, a natural pink lipstick. I avoided dramatic colors because I wanted to feel like myself rather than someone wearing a costume. Next came the outfit. After trying nearly 10 different combinations, I chose a simple knee-length navy dress with a light cream cardigan. It looked elegant without attracting attention. Comfortable nude flats replaced the heels I had originally planned to wear. Looking fashionable meant nothing if I couldn't walk naturally. A medium-length brown wig framed my face softly, and simple pearl earrings completed the look. When I finally stood in front of the full-length mirror, I smiled. Not because I looked perfect, because I looked comfortable. For the first time, I wasn't trying to become someone else. I was allowing another part of myself to exist. My handbag contained only the essentials: keys, phone, tissues, a small powder compact, lipstick for touch-ups, and a bottle of water. Somehow carrying a handbag made everything feel more real than wearing the dress itself. Then I walked toward the front door. Each step echoed through the silent house. My heartbeat became louder. I wrapped my fingers around the handle. This time I didn't let go. The door opened. Cool morning air brushed gently across my face. I stood there frozen. One foot remained inside. The other slowly stepped onto the path outside. Nothing happened. No dramatic music. No neighbors pointing. No one shouting. Only birds singing in the distance and the sound of leaves moving gently in the breeze. I laughed quietly to myself. Months of fear had imagined a world that didn't exist. The street looked exactly as it had every other morning. The only thing that had changed was me. I locked the door behind me, took one deep breath, straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin slightly, and began walking toward the end of the street, unaware that the biggest challenge of the day was still waiting just around the corner. Every sound suddenly felt louder than usual. My own footsteps seemed to echo in my ears, and I became painfully aware of every movement I made. I wondered if I was swinging my arms correctly, if my shoulders looked too tense, if my pace seemed natural. The more I thought about it, the stiffer I became. Then I remembered something I had learned during months of practice. Confidence doesn't come from trying to look perfect. It comes from accepting that nobody walks perfectly all the time. I slowed my breathing, relaxed my shoulders, and focused on enjoying the morning instead of judging every step. A few minutes later, an elderly woman appeared on the opposite side of the pavement, walking a small white dog. My heart immediately began racing again. This was it. My first real encounter. I considered turning around. I considered pretending to answer my phone. Instead, I kept walking. As we passed each other, she smiled warmly and said, "Good morning." Without thinking, I smiled back. "Good morning." That was it. She continued walking. The dog looked at me for half a second before happily following its owner. The world didn't stop spinning. Nobody stared. Nobody questioned me. I couldn't help smiling to myself. Months of anxiety had disappeared in less than 5 seconds. The first stranger I met had simply treated me like another person walking down the street. That tiny moment gave me more confidence than every hour I had spent practicing in front of a mirror. I continued toward a nearby park where people usually went for morning walks. Part of me wondered if it was too ambitious for my first outing, but another part realized that hiding forever would never help me grow. The park entrance came into view. Joggers passed by without slowing down. Parents pushed strollers while chatting. A group of older men laughed together on a nearby bench. Everyone seemed busy living their own lives. I quietly reminded myself of another important lesson. People are usually thinking about themselves far more than they're thinking about you. I found an empty bench beneath a large tree and sat down, carefully smoothing my dress before sitting. That simple movement made me smile because it had become completely natural through practice. 6 months earlier, I would have forgotten entirely. As I watched people walking through the park, something unexpected happened. I stopped wondering whether they were looking at me. Instead, I started appreciating the beautiful morning. Sunlight filtered through the trees, creating soft patterns on the path. Children laughed in the distance. Birds landed nearby, searching for crumbs. The peaceful atmosphere slowly replaced the fear that had been controlling me for so long. Then my phone vibrated. It was a message from my closest online friend, another crossdresser who lived hundreds of miles away. "Did you do it?" I looked around the park before replying with a selfie from the bench. "I'm outside." Within seconds, the reply arrived. "I'm so proud of you." Those 4 words nearly brought tears to my eyes. Sometimes the people who understand us best have never met us in person. After sitting for almost 20 minutes, I decided to visit a small cafe a few streets away. Ordering a drink felt like another huge milestone. Walking through the door was somehow even scarier than leaving my house. The cafe was quiet. Only 3 customers sat inside. I joined the short queue and tried to stay calm. The young barista looked up with a friendly smile. Good morning. What can I get for you? For a split second, I forgot every word I knew. Then I smiled. Just a cappuccino, please. No problem. She prepared the drink exactly as she would for any other customer. No strange expression. No awkward questions. When she handed me the cup, she simply wished me a nice day. As I carried my drink to a window seat, I realized something important. The confidence I had been searching for wasn't waiting at home. It only appeared after I faced the situations that frightened me. Sitting beside the window, I watched people passing outside while enjoying every sip. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't performing. I was simply existing. A little girl walked past holding her father's hand. She waved at everyone she looked at. When she noticed me, she smiled and waved. I waved back. She giggled before continuing down the street. Children often react honestly, and her simple kindness reminded me how much fear adults create inside their own minds. About an hour later, I visited a small clothing boutique. I had dreamed about shopping while presenting femininely ever since I bought my first dress online. Walking into the store felt surreal. A sales assistant greeted me politely. "Let me know if you need any help." I thanked her and slowly browsed through the racks. Instead of rushing, I examined fabrics, colors, and styles with genuine curiosity. I realized how different shopping felt when I allowed myself to enjoy the experience rather than worrying about what anyone else might think. Eventually, I chose a soft pastel blouse and carried it to the changing room. Standing in front of another mirror, wearing clothes under bright shop lighting instead of my bedroom lamp, felt strangely emotional. The reflection looking back at me wasn't flawless. My makeup wasn't magazine quality. My posture still needed work. My voice occasionally slipped back to its natural tone. But none of those things mattered as much as I once believed. Progress mattered more than perfection. When I left the changing room, the sales assistant smiled. "That color really suits you." It was such a simple compliment, yet it stayed with me for the rest of the day. I bought the blouse, thanked her, and stepped back outside carrying my very first shopping bag from a trip where I had presented as my feminine self from beginning to end. As I looked at the bag swinging gently beside me, I realized it wasn't the blouse that made it special. It was the memory attached to it. Years from now, I knew I would look at it and remember the day fear finally stopped making my decisions. Little did I know, the most unforgettable moment of the entire day was about to happen before I reached home. As I began the walk home, the afternoon sun felt warmer than it had that morning. Maybe the temperature hadn't changed at all. Maybe I had. Every step felt lighter now. The fear that had been sitting on my shoulders for months had slowly been replaced by something far more powerful: belief. I no longer kept checking every shop window to see how I looked. I wasn't constantly adjusting my cardigan or worrying about whether my wig was perfectly in place. Instead, I was finally paying attention to the world around me. Then it happened. Halfway home, I noticed someone familiar walking toward me. My heart immediately dropped. It was someone from work. For a split second, every nightmare I had imagined over the past year came rushing back. My instinct was to turn around, but that would only make me look suspicious. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to escape. I kept walking. The distance between us grew smaller. 10 meters. 5. 3. He looked at me for a brief moment, smiled politely, nodded his head, and continued walking without stopping. That was it. He didn't recognize me. Even if he had, he clearly wasn't interested in creating a scene. I stood there for a second after passing him, almost laughing at myself. I had spent months preparing for a disaster that existed only in my imagination. The biggest prison I had ever lived in was in my bedroom. It was my own fear. I continued walking, and for the first time all day, I genuinely felt relaxed. I decided to take the longer route home instead of the quickest one. Not because I needed more time away from home, but because I wasn't ready for the day to end. I passed a flower shop where colorful bouquets filled the pavement outside. Their bright colors instantly caught my attention. Without overthinking it, I walked inside. The owner smiled warmly. "Looking for anything special?" I looked around before pointing at a small bouquet of pink and white flowers. "Just these, thank you." As she wrapped them carefully, she smiled. "Someone's lucky." I smiled back. They're actually for me. She paused for a moment before saying something I'll never forget. That's the best reason to buy flowers. I carried those flowers all the way home with the biggest smile on my face. Sometimes the smallest conversations leave the deepest memories. When I finally reached my front door, I stopped before unlocking it. Only a few hours earlier, I had stood in this exact spot, terrified to step outside. Now I found myself hesitating for the opposite reason. I didn't want to go back inside. That surprised me more than anything. My house had always been the only place where I felt safe expressing my feminine side. Now the outside world didn't seem nearly as frightening. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The silence felt different. I placed my handbag on the table, the shopping bag beside it, the flowers in a glass of water. Then I walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't perfect. A few strands of hair had moved out of place. My lipstick had faded slightly after drinking coffee. My mascara wasn't quite as fresh as it had been that morning. My feet were a little tired, but my smile was completely real. For the first time, I wasn't judging my appearance. I was remembering everything that reflection had accomplished. One walk, one cafe, one shop, one park, one ordinary day. Yet those ordinary moments had quietly changed something extraordinary inside me. That evening I wrote down everything I had learned, hoping I would never forget it. Lesson 1. Don't chase perfection before leaving home. Perfection keeps moving further away. Confidence only grows through experience. Lesson 2. Choose an outfit that makes you comfortable, not one that demands constant attention. When you feel comfortable, your body naturally relaxes. Lesson 3. Walk at your normal pace. Trying too hard to look feminine often attracts more attention than simply being yourself. Lesson 4. Smile. Not because you're pretending, because smiling relaxes your face and helps calm your mind. Lesson 5. Remember that almost everyone you pass is busy thinking about their own life. Most strangers forget seeing us within seconds. Lesson 6. Accept small imperfections. A slightly uneven eyeliner or a little nervousness doesn't ruin the experience. Nobody is analyzing you as closely as you analyze yourself. Lesson 7. Celebrate every milestone. Your first walk, your first coffee, your first compliment, your first purchase. Each one becomes another piece of confidence you can carry into the future. Over the following weeks, going outside became easier. I visited museums. I browsed bookstores. I enjoyed quiet afternoons in cafes. I even attended a local makeup workshop where I learned blending techniques from professionals and discovered that everyone, regardless of experience, was still learning something new. The woman who taught the class ended with advice that stayed with me. Confidence isn't something you wear. It's something you practice. Those words perfectly described my journey. Crossdressing had started with clothes. Then it became about makeup. Then posture. Then voice. But eventually I realized it had never truly been about any of those things. It was about allowing myself to stop hiding. The first step outside wasn't the end of my journey. It was the beginning. If you're watching this and you've been standing behind your own front door, wondering whether you're ready, remember this. You don't need to feel fearless before taking that first step. You only need enough courage to open the door. Everything else comes one step at a time. Years from now, you probably won't remember every outfit you wore or every compliment you received. But you'll always remember the day you finally chose courage over fear. And sometimes, that single decision is enough to change the rest of your life forever. The next weekend arrived much faster than I expected. This time there was no long debate in front of the mirror and no endless list of excuses. I still felt nervous, but the fear no longer controlled every decision. Instead of wondering whether I should go outside, I found myself thinking about where I wanted to go. That simple change felt like a victory. I chose a light floral blouse with a dark skirt, comfortable ballet flats, and a small silver necklace. My makeup routine, which had once taken nearly 2 hours, was now finished in less than 45 minutes. More importantly, I wasn't chasing perfection anymore. I had learned that confidence made a much bigger difference than another layer of concealer or another attempt at perfect eyeliner. As I looked in the mirror, I noticed something surprising. I wasn't searching for flaws first. I was smiling first. That alone showed how much I had changed. I decided to visit a shopping center across town, somewhere I had always considered impossible for a first outing. It would be busier than the quiet streets I had visited before, but I reminded myself of everything I had already accomplished. Every experience had taught me that people were far kinder or far less interested than fear had convinced me. The bus ride there became another unexpected milestone. As I climbed aboard, I quietly greeted the driver, paid my fare, and found an empty seat near the window. My heart beat a little faster as more passengers stepped on at each stop, but nobody paid special attention to me. Some were scrolling through their phones. Others were chatting with friends or simply looking out the window. Life continued exactly as it always had. Watching everyone around me made me realize something important. Every person on that bus had worries, plans, responsibilities, and dreams of their own. They weren't spending their journey analyzing the stranger sitting a few seats away. I had spent so long imagining that I was the center of everyone's attention when, in reality, I was simply another passenger sharing the ride. When I arrived at the shopping center, I took a deep breath before walking through the main entrance. Bright lights reflected from polished floors while music played softly in the background. Families, couples, and groups of friends filled the walkways. Only a week earlier, I would have turned around immediately. Now I kept walking. I wandered through clothing stores, bookstores, and beauty shops, taking my time instead of rushing. In one cosmetics store, I finally asked an assistant for advice on choosing a lipstick that suited my skin tone. She showed me several shades and explained the difference between matte and satin finishes, giving the same helpful advice she would offer any customer. I realized that asking questions wasn't something to fear. Most people genuinely enjoy helping when approached politely. Before leaving the store, she smiled and said, "Have fun experimenting. Makeup is all about finding what makes you feel comfortable." Those words stayed with me for the rest of the afternoon. As I walked back through the shopping center carrying a small cosmetics bag, I remembered the version of myself who couldn't even step outside the front door. If I could speak to that frightened person now, I would simply say, "You are stronger than you think." Confidence hadn't appeared overnight. It had been built one small decision at a time. One deep breath. One step outside. One smile. One conversation. One ordinary day after another. Looking back, my first time outside as a woman wasn't memorable because everything went perfectly. It was memorable because I finally stopped waiting for the perfect moment. I accepted that growth always feels uncomfortable at first, and that every new experience teaches something no mirror ever can. If you're preparing for your own first outing, remember that it's perfectly normal to feel nervous. Start somewhere quiet if that helps. Wear something comfortable. Walk at your own pace. Don't compare your beginning to someone else's years of experience. Most importantly, allow yourself to enjoy the journey instead of constantly judging every detail. The first step is always the hardest, but once it's behind you, every step after that becomes just a little easier. That first walk outside didn't simply change the way I dressed. It changed the way I believed in myself. And sometimes, the smallest act of courage opens the door to a lifetime of confidence.